It takes a lot of ingredients to fix or build a car, like cooking, but without the frozen dinner easy way out. eBay Motors has 122 million parts. It's always the right fitment, so you can follow any recipe to a T. Whether it's a vintage Italian coupe that's classic like Grandma's meatballs or a German luxury car that's as complicated as Oma's rouladen, to cook up something great in the garage, use the eBay Motors app or visit ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.
Holidays are here, and so is fashionable fitness. Gift yourself a Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3 5G, a phone that folds in half to literally stand on its own. Pair it with the Galaxy Watch 4 for ultimate wellness and wow factor. Check health stats, flex personal records. Over 90 activities can be tracked, like biking, swimming, golfing, and more. Invest in yourself with tech made to crush goals. Holidays open up with Galaxy. Shop it all at Samsung.com. 5G connection and availability may vary. Check with carrier. Products sold separately.
Hey everyone, this is the Almost World Podcast. Bringing to you mind-blowing interviews with guests from all over the world. So settle down, relax, and enjoy the show. Oh yeah, by the way, if you like the podcast, please support Elmo's World Podcast on Patreon. Your support is what helps the podcast improve more and more.
Okay. And I was born in Sydney in 1976. Okay. And I'm an Australian citizen and also a British citizen. I was able to become a British citizen because my father was born in the UK. And I'm a mathematician. I've got a PhD in maths, and I've done 2 postdoctoral research positions. I've got a few peer-reviewed publications, and I'm working on more stuff, seeking paid work at the moment. And I'm living in the Netherlands, and I'm married to Mari. Mari was born in Armenia. I met her a few years ago. Mari has now become a Dutch citizen, and she works in software development, and we're living together in this flat. And as I say, I'm doing research, seeking paid work, and my past work experience has basically been mostly in doing research in mathematics, but I have a strong amateur interest in philosophy. I also do have one philosophy publication. It was just recently accepted. It's related to the philosophy of set theory, to do with the question of if you're considering candidates for new axioms to be added to the standard set of axioms for set theory, then what are the range of possible axioms for which we can speak of justification, specifically intrinsic justification, meaning following just from the concept of set and not from considerations about whether we like the consequences of the axiom or stuff like that, but just, from the concept itself of set itself. So that's what the paper's about. And, so I have a lot of knowledge of pure mathematics. I have quite strong interests in physics and philosophy of physics. I'm interested in philosophy of mind, philosophy of religion, philosophy of science, philosophy of maths, moral philosophy, metaethics, metaphysics. No. Okay, and that's me. Is there anything more you need to know?
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess we have to start from the basics, right? And
yeah, sure.
I would ask you, do you hold a physicalist worldview that everything is just material?
I suspect that something like that might be true. I would qualify it a little bit, because if we're talking about mathematical truth, like the way I make sense of mathematical truth, I probably favour a view that's called modal structuralism. Mm-hmm. Like, are you familiar with the notion of modality? When we speak of propositions being possible or necessary, we call that modality. So modal structuralism basically analyses mathematical statements in terms of a language that's got modal operators in it, and also these things that we call second-order quantifiers. Like, the exact description is a bit technical, but it's basically about the idea that mathematical claims can be analysed as claims about the possibility of certain types of structures. That's roughly what it is. So I analyse mathematical truth in that way. So I do think there are mathematical properties, and I don't think you can speak of them just being physical properties. But apart from that, I suspect that all of reality is physical, yeah. You could ask about what exactly does that mean, because if we discover some new fundamental ingredient of reality, how will we know whether to call it physical or not? But I think we've probably currently got the basic building blocks of physical reality, more or less. We still don't know much about dark matter, for example. We don't know what it is. But like the way physics looks now, some small extension of that will roughly cover the basic description of the basic laws of physical reality. There'll be a bit of room for mathematical truth as well. And the truth about mental states, mental processes will turn out to supervene on the truth about physical processes in the brain in some way or other. And yeah, like I would say that's more or less all of reality. You can talk about propositions about spiritual experiences or artistic truths, statements about what is beautiful or whatever. But in the end, those are just language games we play, and we can more or less analyse all truths in terms of truths about physical reality, sort of, the basic level of physics. That's bedrock. And I suspect that might be true. I'm not claiming to know it, but, based on what I've studied so far and the range of views I looked at, I suspect that may be the best view. Yep. Which is physicalism, the view that more or less all of reality is basically physical.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, you mentioned modal structuralism. And it's basically that we can analyze the universe
that's mathematical propositions.
Mathematical. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm talking about pure mathematics. Okay. So it's the view that, with regard to statements of set theory, you analyse them in terms of speaking about what kind of mathematical structures are possible in a mathematical sense. But that's a way of analysing pure mathematics to make sense of how mathematical propositions could have determinate truth values.
Would you say that the mathematical propositions that we currently have, in order to analyze reality, would you say that these are prescribing reality itself, or already embedded in what reality is, or is it something that we just conceived, or just an abstract thing conceived in our minds? Or is it really something that the universe sort of obeys, or a law governing it?
Well, there's pure mathematics and applied mathematics, and yes, they are different. So when we do applied mathematics, for example, if we come up with some kind of mathematical model, some kind of mathematical foundation for quantum field theory or whatever, and this model is going to help you to predict, your probability distributions for what experiences you'll have next. That's what models in physics are used for, predicting the outcomes of experiments, predicting what experiences will happen next. So we can sort of talk about, the relationship between, this mathematical structure we have in our mind and, the actual structure of physical reality out there. Now, we definitely can't say, we know that's a relation of isomorphism for all sorts of reasons, because if you think about, for example, string theory, which, may be the best approach to quantum gravity, we're not sure. We don't really know how to experimentally test it, but, it might be our best account of quantum gravity, but it says the number of dimensions of space-time is 11 and not 4. So, we're even entertaining that maybe we've got the number of dimensions of space-time wrong. So when we're so radically uncertain about how physical reality might be structured, and we're also uncertain about, is physical space and time continuous or discrete? So there are all sorts of uncertainties. So when we posit a particular mathematical model, all that we're saying is this model is good enough for our purposes right now. So when we're doing pure maths, we have these mathematical structures and we have an absolutely clear conception of, what they are and what axioms we're assuming about them. But when we go to physical reality, it's sort of like this model is good enough for what I want to do right now, but I can't claim to know that the relationship isn't isomorphism, but there's some kind of similarity relation there. And so in this way, I'm learning more and more about how physical reality is in itself. I think that's something like that is the best account to give.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. Well, when you say that you have a physicalist worldview, that would be like saying, making a positive claim that idealism or things that, let's say the hologram theory, that it is somewhat wrong, or making a false claim about, because, I guess
Look, I'm not sure about the hologram theory. My understanding was that's a conjecture and string theory. I'm afraid I can't comment, but I understand it to be a physical conjecture. So if you can experimentally test it, then yeah, fine. With regard to idealism, I do believe it's saying something false. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I guess then when it comes to your epistemology, right, and you're not going to propose or take the position of idealists, even though they might posit some good mathematical arguments for their claims. It's because you prefer testable theories and that can make predictions and basically just...
I certainly prefer testable claims, sure, but idealists can make those too. I'm open to listening to arguments for idealism, and I've read a few people who try to defend it, like Bernardo Castro. I just don't think there's an especially strong case to be made for it. If you look at what happens when we actually try to understand our experiences, it seems as though our best models for predicting what's going to happen next are in terms of physical objects. It doesn't really work if you try and say everything is ultimately just mental, because you run into problems such as, what about the history of the universe before there were any minds, or, what am I to say about bits of physical reality that are currently unobserved, all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so what would be your epistemology, I guess, in terms of what you would, the process of how you think you know things? For example, you are sure for yourself that physicalism is the worldview that would reflect reality the most for you. So how do you know that, or what process, or what? Yeah.
Well, talking about epistemology in general is a pretty big topic, but with regard to that particular claim, I think physicalism might be true. I suspect it may be the best theory, and why am I so confident? It's basically because when you try to construct theories about the world that are actually useful from the point of view of predicting what we'll experience next and actually helping us to do things that we want to do, such as construct computers, which we're using to have this conversation now, or all the amazing technological achievements we've got now, theories that are useful from that point of view. When we're trying to construct theories that have predictive power and are useful in that sense, by far and away the most successful methods are the methods of the natural sciences, and in particular physics. And they seem to give us a picture of the world where everything is ultimately based on the ultimate physical constituents of reality. And then you ask, well, do we have reason to believe there might be more to reality than that? And of course you can look at the possible claims of maybe there's some other component to reality on a case-by-case basis. And if there was some good case to be made, I'd be willing to hear it. But I just don't see it because, for example, with regard to the mind, I suspect the mind may be ultimately physical, and I don't really know of a good reason to think otherwise. And with regard to mathematical truth, I can see at that point, that's an example of a case where you can speak of non-physical properties that are part of reality, but that's just a very minor extension. And so basically I think if you try to account for all of our discourse, by having it all bottom out in the language of physics, as far as I know, it works. If I find a reason to think it doesn't work, okay, I'll change my view. But as far as I can tell, this is all right. So therefore, Occam's razor, this is the best account. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, but that sort of sounds like because you say that you only suspect, or this is what it appears to me to be.
I'm not claiming infallible knowledge, not at all. I suspect, and I'm open to revising my view if other considerations come my way. And I don't think metaphysics is the kind of area where you can have beliefs that are anywhere near as confident as you can have in physics or mathematics. Any belief in metaphysics has got to be tentative. But I still think I'm just fine in saying it's fairly likely, probably a little bit more likely than not that physicalism is true. I think I'm justified in holding that stance for the reasons I just gave.
Okay. So this is what it appears to me that on how what your epistemology is, that basically that you ground yourself on physics, on science, on things that we can actually make cases, look at case basis, and actually make testable predictions and actually know what is true, right, and what is repetitive. and then you sort of reflect that on metaphysics.
Well, when you're evaluating a physical theory, your ultimate test is going to be, is it successful at making predictions for a broad range of phenomena and making the predictions correctly over and over again? If it can succeed by that criterion, then okay, you've got a well-tested physical theory, and also one that survives every attempt at falsification. You try as hard as you can to falsify it and it just stands up. When you've got that, that's a successful physical theory. Examples would include general relativity or quantum mechanics or whatever. So those are successful physical theories, yeah. Now, I say that these kind of accounts of how the world behaves are probably our best guide to what reality ultimately is, because, they are the ones that, have the most predictive power. They are the best ones from the point of view of predicting future experiences, allowing us to do things that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do, and which, in previous centuries we would never have dreamed we might be able to do. They're very successful from that point of view. Now, is there maybe some other criterion that you could use to judge some other account of how reality might be, like, something which posits supernatural phenomena but doesn't claim predictive power or whatever, like a religious teaching or, something else, a substance dualist account of mind or whatever? Like, I'm always open to hearing someone out, make a case for why I should extend the basic ontology of my worldview beyond just physical entities. Just listen to me and I'll see if you've got a good argument for why I should do that. But I haven't found one yet. So for that reason, for the moment at least, I'm going to stick with a basically physicalist ontology, but also allowing for saying that, with regard to mathematical properties, we can talk about truth determinants there, but you don't need any ontology for that. You just need a notion of modality.
Well, I guess that when it comes to metaphysics, right, I think that both idealists and physicalists are on the same ground still on making testable predictions and all of that stuff, because it is.
If you try to come up with a version of idealism which is good at making predictions and doesn't run into any kind of problems, I think it's a little bit difficult to make it into a fully coherent account of how things are that sort of stands together as a coherent theory. I mean, it's not that I've never seen anyone try. I know Bernardo Kastrup has a good try, but in the end, you're almost making it physicalism in disguise, really, when you fully carry it out, because, you've got to say something about, what about physical objects that, seem to be there even when you're not observing them, or, what about, it seems that the world still existed before any minds were present, and, all sorts of stuff like that. When you fully carry it out, it's sort of like, well, you're just reintroducing the physical entities and, saying we're going to call them mental phenomena. Like, that's basically what it looks like. Like, what Bernardo Kastrup does is he has to posit the mind of God to make it all work, which is basically same as Bishop Berkeley. So, yeah, all right, but why should I think that's a better account of how reality is structured? Because I just don't know why I prefer that particular account. Does it help me make any new predictions that I wouldn't be otherwise able to make, or does it somehow hang together as a theory in a nicer way? So, yeah, like, I just don't buy it. I don't see a compelling case for it, but I would be open to considering it seriously if you can just show me some good reason why I can prefer it to a physicalist account of the world, which it just seems to me to hang together better, have all the predictive power you need. It seems to me to be the best theory.
Well, when it comes to that, right, you take that kind of position for idealism, but the same goes with physicalism too. There are some incoherence in physicalist theories as well. And
would you be able to give me one example of that? What do you have in mind there? Do you mean unsolved problems, or do you mean actual contradictions, or what do you mean?
Maybe black holes, the philosophy of mind.
Well, we've observed black holes. We've even constructed a photograph of one, and our mathematical model for how they work is not too bad, and we've predicted Hawking radiation, observed it. Like, it's not as though our theory of black holes is all that bad. I think there's something called the information paradox or whatever. I'm not saying I'm fully on top of all the details, but our understanding of black holes is okay, and we definitely know they're there. So, No, I don't know why that's just a major example of a gap.
Well,
if you're going to do something such as say,
when people talk about black holes, I just had a guest recently, when it comes to black holes, right, it actually does not obey, let's say, the laws of thermodynamics, because like if matter is gets sucked into a black hole, what happens to it and all of that?
You need to fill me in there, but like it's a difficulty with reconciling it with the second law of thermodynamics, but I'm pretty sure Stephen Hawking has figured out how to resolve that issue. It's an issue of, the black hole gradually decays by emitting Hawking radiation and eventually it goes pop. It's totally consistent with the idea that entropy is constantly increasing over time. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm not aware of any fundamental difficulty of reconciling it with the second law of thermodynamics. I mean, I say this as someone who, doesn't necessarily fully have his finger on the pulse there, but if there was a strong reason to think black holes were not consistent with the second law of thermodynamics, I'm sure we'd be hearing a lot more about it because the second law of thermodynamics is the most solid piece of physics we've got. So, I suspect that maybe that comment was a little bit misleading. Yeah.
Okay. But I guess he made the argument that, for example, it takes because reality is made up of information, and information can only be interpreted with a dictionary. And a dictionary needs someone who could hold truth propositions, maintain them, like someone like God, and that's why
So if a structure gets absorbed into a black hole, then the information content is lost. And I have heard of that, but I believe I've also heard of an attempted solution, speaking in terms of the surface area of the black hole. And I'm sorry, I just don't have all the mathematical material immediately to hand. But I'm definitely aware that this problem has been considered, and I think I'm aware of a claim that we do know how to solve it. But yes, it's an interesting problem to think about. It's an important problem. The information paradox. What happens when information goes into a black hole and you can't get it out again? But I mean, your friend probably has the advantage of me. I don't know whether they know more physics than I do.
I guess I'm aware now of how you look at the cosmology, the metaphysics, and the epistemology. Okay, but when it comes to your own view of life, generally you're someone less purely physicalist. We're basically accidents, and so what's in it for us in this experience, this phenomena of life, right? If you would actually, we can't deny that in a physicalist worldview, it's purely nihilist, I guess. But you could call it like existential nihilism, but it's nihilist nonetheless.
I find that there are things I care about. I mean, for example, why am I bothering to do this interview? Well, I must be achieving some goals I care about. Maybe I find it interesting to have the discussion or something. Whatever it is, like each action I take is aimed at getting something I care about. If I write a job application, I'm hoping to get into a situation where I can earn money. That's because I want to contribute to the household income, help my wife, help her family, be more comfortable and secure myself, and, maybe contribute something to making the world better, support charities that are actively, helping humans and animals or trying to prevent human extinction. So, those kind of considerations, trying to achieve goals that I care about, that's what drives me to do the things that I do, which as far as I know is the same for everyone. It's just that there's variations in the things that people care about. So, for example, I care about not contributing to the suffering of farm animals, so I'm vegan, and I care about trying to prevent human extinction. So, I try and teach myself about the major extinction risks, and I try and get to the point where I can do research on the problem of how to align artificial intelligence, because maybe that's an extinction risk. I do all that kind of stuff. So any action I take, it somehow has a place within the set of values that I care about, the set of values that I'm trying to achieve. So,
Okay.
So the things that I care about, I just find that I care about them, and that's it.
I guess then if we put it in a sort of a scale, it would be maximal well-being and health and happiness, right? And to the end, it's the worst possible
those will definitely
scenario.
be among the goals, for myself and for others. Those would be among the goals, sure.
Okay, so but why pursue them though? I guess it's sort of very subjective, I guess. And if you look at it,
do you pursue them? Yeah. Do you pursue well-being and health and happiness, at least for yourself and for your loved ones? Is that what you do? Do you know why you do it?
Well,
Can
I
you
guess
explain?
it's not, this interview is not about me, but we could talk about my worldview. But I just want to analyze your thought
All right.
process.
Well, if you're asking why do I pursue those things, I find that I desire to achieve them, and it comes naturally to me to try to take steps to achieve them. Probably because I'm a product of natural selection, but there's an emotional component here too. Of course, if I find that I have achieved a goal that I care about, if I'm feeling healthy, happy, then there's an emotional reward there. Feeling of pleasure, well-being, those things drive me to keep on taking action to maintain that state. So that's just how it works. As far as I know, that's how humans work. Yeah.
Okay, I won't push back on that anymore. Okay, that it is. Well, everyone has their reasons, I guess, and ultimately it is subjective. But okay.
Yeah. I'm telling you, I cannot give you a more fundamental reason than that. I'm telling you, those areas are basically bedrock. You just pursue them because, you just do.
It's intuitional, I guess,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But when it comes to your moral code, right, you mentioned a set of value ethics. What would that be, or how would you define it?
Yeah. My personal moral code, I'm influenced a fair bit by the writings of Magnus Finding on suffering-focused ethics, which is basically the idea that the key value we should give the most weight to is to try to prevent suffering that is happening, suffering that is experienced by some sentient being anywhere in the universe as much as we possibly can. And that should be the key consideration driving how we plan our lives. I'm influenced by that, and I do try to live up to it. I don't necessarily say I live up to it perfectly. I'm also influenced by the idea that, you should respect the rights of others. You shouldn't coerce another into doing something that they don't consent to. You shouldn't deceive people. You should be honest with people, and and you should take responsibility for caring for your own needs. Be independent, care for yourself and those you love, and do so in a way which is honest and which offers value to the world. If you want to earn money, then you have to offer value to the world in exchange for that money. And and when you have actually obtained money and you have enough to meet your own needs and those of your loved ones, you may wish to donate some of that money towards making the world better in whatever way seems best. And you have to actively use reason and evidence to figure out what are the best donation opportunities here, if you do want to donate the money right now or invest to donate it later on. And, one may sort of think of, are there risks? Our species may become extinct. Should we try to mitigate the major extinction risks, or the major risks that very large quantities of suffering will happen in the future? All that kind of thing. So you think about it's an open question, and it's part of science. How do you best reduce suffering? How do you make the world better? That question could be seen as a part of science. So the project of your life is to figure out, how can I make my best contribution here? And also, I believe that when you're aware that a certain product that you might want to buy, such as, for example, meat from the supermarket or whatever, if you're reasonably aware that the production process causes harm to others, and you can avoid buying it at no cost to yourself. So that could be, some kind of animal product, or it could be, some brand of coffee that you happen to know is grown with human slave labour. If you can reasonably avoid that product at no great cost, and of course it gets difficult because, even electricity production causes some harm to animals, so you can't be an absolutist here, but to the greatest extent reasonably possible. Like if you're aware that a certain product involved using an animal as an item of property in a harmful way, or the exploitation of another human being, if it involved the causing of serious harm or exploitation and you can reasonably avoid it, you don't really need it, then you boycott that product, and that's why I'm doing. So stuff like that is my ethical code.
I guess, it's not absolute.
Yeah, it is influenced by utilitarianism quite a lot, but there are a few deontological elements to it as well. The idea that there are certain rules that you try to respect, regardless of the effect on the outcome. But that can sort of be reconciled with utilitarianism as well in a way, because you can look at it from a rule utilitarian point of view or whatever. So, basically it's quite a lot like what you would call negative utilitarianism. So it's utilitarianism but focused on preventing suffering as the key value above all others. Yeah, so that's roughly it. Yep.
Okay. So I guess then that when it comes to your value ethics, you say that it's sort of a negative utilitarianism, but how about simply when you come into a decision where you have to choose between two evils, right? How would you determine which property or which attribute is the lesser evil, I guess? Like, for example...
do you want to give me an example, or do you want me to try and think of an example myself?
Like, for example, if someone either gets raped or someone dies, right? How would you choose that? If you like, where would your actions?
If those are literally the only choices, and I have to make a choice.
Yeah.
Like, you could never possibly run into a situation like that in real life. But if I had to make such a choice and there were no other options, assuming the person who was raped would eventually recover from their ordeal and live years of happy life afterwards, whereas the person who would die, they would have many years of happy life totally cut short, then it sounds to me as though it's better to let the rape happen. But, that's a very difficult judgment to make and has to be case by case, because what if the rape involved really intense suffering, and what if it gave rise to a life long full of suffering from depression, or, these are complex questions. But, it sounds to me as though probably the rape would be the better thing to allow to happen. But that's a totally artificial thought experiment that has nothing at all to do with any situation that could come up in real life. Also, you may be thinking along the lines of, would I myself actually be responsible for the rape to prevent the death? And that's very, very different, because that raises the question of, do you sometimes respect deontological constraints, even though maybe it makes the outcome better to violate the constraints? And that's a very complicated issue. And, I didn't say I have no deontological intuitions at all. Like, I am inclined to respect deontological constraints that you don't harm an innocent person. So, that's quite a difficult issue. And,
okay,
I could talk about my ideas about that for a while.
Well, you mentioned the deontological intuitions, right? But it's really interesting how that could be something that would be fundamental to your moral ethics, though. Like, if it's simply intuition, right? Why put value in it? Why give significance into it?
I don't think it has to be purely intuition, because if you have a look at what Henry Sidgwick did in the Methods of Ethics, he did a very interesting detailed analysis of the common sense morality of his time, and he showed how it could ultimately be given a utilitarian foundation, and utilitarianism could also be used to settle hard cases. You can also think about, in terms of the practicalities of life, if you're trying to make your way through the world and, get
but I guess it's sort of a circular argument, though, right? Because you're preferring utilitarianism, like a lesser evil, negative utilitarianism, because of your intuition.
Well, you asked me to express a preference about two different outcomes, so I told you which outcome I thought.
You're right. But I'm questioning is your fundamentals of your preference. What are the foundations as to why you prefer this, right? It's I would say that.
Well, I gave some indication because I indicated that. I indicated the kind of considerations that would come into play. Because, for example, I spoke of the possibility that maybe the death would deprive the person of many years of happy life, but maybe in the case of the person who was a victim of rape, they might at least eventually recover from the ordeal, stop suffering, and go on to live more years of happy life. So I gave an indication of the kind of considerations that might lead you to make a judgment, but it depends on the circumstances. And there would be some circumstances where you would say it's better that the death should happen because there are so many factors. From the bare bones description of the case you gave me, I can't judge from that. But I just gave you the kind of considerations that matter.
It's that you prefer this situation because that's what your intuition tells you, basically.
It's ultimately based on the hedonic quality of the conscious experiences that happen. Pleasant experiences, unpleasant experiences, their weight, their intensity, and how long, how many of them. Those are the considerations that matter.
So utilitarianism plus hedonism, okay. I'm fine with that, okay, but...
let's go with hedonism, although you can be a preference utilitarian as well. But let's say I accept hedonism in the sense that, it's pleasure and pain that ultimately matter. Sure, why not? I'll go with that. Yeah.
Okay, but would you call like the preference for hedonism or pleasure or maximal pleasure to be sort of like a belief, I guess, because there could be no fundamental reason as to why people should choose pleasure than like less, or less pleasure. Why choose more?
Well, let's get clear about the question you're asking, because it is a tendency in humans. They do
It's
generally
biological,
tend to
I
choose
guess.
pleasure. But what's your question? Like, are you asking, is the moral truth, or what is the question? Yeah.
Well, I guess the question is, right, like, why should I choose pleasure? That I guess it's. My question.
Well, you
would
don't
be
have to. If you prefer pain, go for it. You probably don't, do you? Yeah, I mean, no one's saying you have to choose pleasure, but most humans do. Like, we sort of talking about, am I saying you have a moral obligation to choose pleasure? Because
No,
I don't even know if I agree with that. So, like, if you
question.
actually prefer pain, then yeah, why not? But yeah.
Okay, but I guess then that
But when you're choosing suffering for another, that's a very, very different matter, because bringing about suffering for another is quite serious. And, if you're doing that without any good reason, then I think you can be morally criticised there. Relative to my own moral code, and, we haven't got to the ultimate foundation for my moral code, but yeah, I suppose perhaps I'm ultimately based in intuition. But yeah, like if someone inflicted suffering on another for no good reason, I would probably morally condemn them. Yeah, and,
I'm not, and that, I don't find that problematic. What I find, I guess, is I want to look at the foundations for why you choose hedonism as the definition of what is moral and what is immoral, right? Because I guess. Would you
I'm
say
not necessarily saying that's exhaustive, because I said there were other considerations as well, such as the violation of rights or whatever. But I think pleasure and pain are a very big component of what ultimately matters.
Okay, but I don't understand how. I don't understand how natural rights is related to hedonism or utilitarianism. And from a physicalist worldview, where can you derive natural rights?
Yeah, it's a difficult topic. I mean, talking about how you can sort of mesh rights and utilitarianism together.
I guess, because you did make that a consideration for your moral code, I guess.
Yeah. Well, let's get clear about what question we're asking, because you mentioned how do I reconcile it with physicalism. I could talk about that. But if you just want to tell me how I do it in an intuition-based way, I can do that, sure, because I already mentioned Henry Sidgwick's work where he said the basic moral rules have the property that, if generally followed, they tend to bring about better outcomes. So you can look at it from that point of view. And I was also saying earlier on that, just from a practical point of view, no matter what it is you want to achieve, if you sort of try to make your way about in the world and, you want to signal to others, it's okay, you can trust me, I'm honest, you can cooperate with me, and, I won't sort of do anything that seriously harms you without your consent. Just from a practical point of view, it's best to go around signaling, I have a policy of respecting these rights no matter what, and that's the best way to get things done, no matter what things you may want to happen to get done. So, sure, I could always imagine, well, maybe if I steal $10 million from someone, I can use it to bring about a lot of good. And, as a once-off case, that could actually be a situation where, yeah, you're right, you should do it. But, as a general policy for making your way out in the world, it just doesn't work unless you're making a policy of respecting others' rights. Don't cause harm to innocent others. Cooperate with people. Don't deceive people. Don't commit fraud. Don't initiate force. Following those rules is basically the way you go about achieving anything at all, whether that be utilitarian goals or just, pleasure for yourself, whatever it is. You have to follow those rules, because there's no other way to practically move about within human society. It doesn't work if you don't follow them.
But basically, human rights is just a social construct, and we assign them for pragmatic purposes for the betterment of society.
It does, in some sense, I think, arise out of the fact that humans have to live together in society, and they have to have, certain protocols for cooperating with one another. So that's what gives rise to the social convention. We will punish someone with the criminal law if they do this. I think that's ultimately what gives rise to it, because we evolved as social primates and we have to live together in complex societies and we have to have ways of sorting out conflicts when they come up. So, I do think in some sense it ultimately arises out of that. But, if you're going to adopt utilitarianism as the ultimate criterion of what you care about, then you can have the policy of pursuing that goal of trying to promote well-being for sentient beings in a rights-respecting manner. And the reason you choose to do that is because that's what works. That's the best way of achieving your goal and indeed any other goal. And
but I guess then that your claims for natural rights and why it's a factor in your moral ethics is because it's basically grounded on the preferring the pleasure, I guess, the maximal pleasure of myself, being that I could be a good part of a social being in society, right? So it's
I don't think you have to tie it in with caring about the well-being of others, although certainly that does help. But I think really, if we're just talking about rights for humans, it really just comes from the fact that, given our nature as social beings, we have to live together with one another and cooperate with one another. It's in some sense just a function of the nature of what we are.
It's
and
for personal pleasure, I guess. Like assigning human rights is for personal pleasure.
That may be your goal. You may sort of want to respect rights in your dealings with one another so that you can seek out personal pleasure for yourself, or, you might want to prevent suffering for other beings, whatever your goal might be. You might want to fall in love, get married, who knows? People have all sorts of goals, or, you might want to go to a monastery and meditate and seek enlightenment. But the reason why you respect rights in your dealings with others is because that's what works in order to help you achieve your goals and signal to people, it's okay, you can cooperate with me. You don't have to worry about me or lock me up. You don't have to worry about not being able to trust me. I will respect your rights. It's the way to achieve anything at all.
Okay.
Yeah. So whatever your goals might happen to be, they could be pleasure or it could be doing pure mathematics. Who knows? Yeah.
Okay, so I guess then now that you've established your, I guess I would say teleology, or I guess it's not teleology, but more on just your moral code, I guess, on how you live life and why you prefer this and prefer that. But can I talk to you about your theology, or I guess your take on theology? And maybe just your criticisms.
I don't think there is sufficient reason for believing theological claims to be true. I've had a look at the attempts to demonstrate that, there is some kind of entity like the God of classical theism. I don't think any of them succeed. And I also think that if you're going to assume that the God of classical theism would be such that, this God would deeply care about the well-beings of the sentient beings in his creation and would fully experience all the horrors that are actually going on in our world, there's no possible way he could have created a world like this one, because he just wouldn't be able to do it. There wouldn't be any consideration that would justify it. So, for that reason too, I think
so it's the problem
a God with all of those properties cannot possibly exist. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, but how about like just a pantheist God, like that is, or a deist one who's ignorant of the pain?
Can you clarify what would justify calling the pantheist God God? Because I do believe the universe exists, but I don't think that's a theological belief. So when does it become pantheism?
I guess it becomes pantheism if it's a conscious mind, or I guess that would be the definition.
Well, I'm not aware of sufficient reason to believe, in that hypothesis, and the same for deism. Like, I haven't encountered consideration that would give me very strong reason to believe it to be true. It might be true, but it also might be true that there's a teapot orbiting the sun. I can't rule that out either, but I don't have very good reason to take it seriously. So,
Okay, but I guess if you look at Occam's razor, right, it's that when we as human beings, we try to solve and make patterns and look at reality and we make experiments. We try to learn, but I guess sometimes the conclusions we make are wrong, and that's why I don't think that using the Occam's razor is the best way to look at the metaphysics of the universe. But
well, you have to come up with ways where if you've made a mistake, you'll be able to catch yourself out in having made that mistake. So if you make a hypothesis, you have to try and falsify it. You have to try and subject it to rigorous experimental tests, which is, by the way, exactly what people who believe in God don't do. They don't allow it to be falsified. But, yeah, like with our physical theories, yeah, we try and falsify them, and if they survive our attempts to falsify them, then we tentatively believe, maybe these are going to turn out to be adequate for making predictions. So, yeah, sure. And Occam's razor is part of that because you try and come up with theories that have the theoretical virtues, which includes postulating as few entities as possible, all other things equal. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, but when it comes to that, it's neither epistemology because I guess you're just making the simplest model in your mind. But it doesn't actually necessarily correspond to reality or the truth itself, right?
Well, we obviously can't speak of infallible knowledge, can we? I mean, no, I can't claim to have discovered for absolute certain the true nature of reality, but I can speak of what I have reason to believe. I could always entertain the hypothesis that there could be a pink unicorn under that bed over there, but I don't have good reason to take it seriously. No, it might be true, but why would I think about it unless I've encountered some consideration that would make me think it's likely to be true? So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but I guess my criticism of I would call you like an atheist worldview because it's a God exclusive worldview. Is that because theists have properly basic beliefs, right? Everybody has. Like if you've heard of Alvin Plantinga, right? So
yes,
I guess that the belief in God is as properly basic as any belief that an atheist would have.
Well, if he says properly basic, then that means it's actually epistemically warranted, right? You're justified in believing it to be true. So yeah, why would that be? Because, I have a vulnerability to mental illness. When I stop taking my medication, I believe all sorts of strange things to be true. Doesn't make them true. How do you know this natural tendency that some people have to believe in God? It could be like that. It could just be some wiring in the brain gone wrong that makes you believe a delusional belief. What steps have you taken to check that it really is the truth? And if he just says, it's a basic belief, then well, what's that? Well, I haven't got such a basic belief, so where are we now? No. Where's his warrant for saying it's properly basic? You really are justified in believing it to actually be true and not just something that seems true to you.
Yeah. I guess being properly basic doesn't have to be falsifiable, though. I guess because if it's intuitionally true to you,
but
like for example,
why should I agree
causality.
with you that's properly basic? Yeah, I don't get it. I can tell him I've got a properly basic belief in the Great Pumpkin, but he has no reason to pay any heed to that. He's not offering me anything that could possibly rationally convince me here. If he just says, I'm sure it's true, well, good on you if you're sure. But that's not a convincing argument.
Okay. I guess, but if it's not, it wouldn't convince you, but it's enough for him to have a good and coherent.
That's fine, but I have no reason to say he's being in any way rational. I have every reason to say, you're just, you're having a delusion or a hallucination. I have every reason to give that account of the matter, unless I encounter some reason to think otherwise. That is the best account I can give. So, if you report you've got a properly basic belief, well, tell me what the experience is like, Have you tested it? Are you absolutely sure? Have you made an effort to investigate whether you might be having a delusion? Like if you've made no effort to test it all, it's just this experience that I can't even describe that makes me sure it's true. It's like, well, that's nothing,
Well, I guess that you're setting a certain standard for what we should believe, though. But
I am.
Yeah, but even in an atheist worldview, there are also things that we have no purely rational reasons to believe, right? And we
Can you give me examples of what you have in mind?
Let's say like your intuition for why you prefer pleasure, or causality.
But I never even said that amounted to a belief. I said it was a personal preference of mine. We can talk about whether there's a belief there. That's a different question. But all I said is, this is my policy about what I choose to do. We haven't even got up to talking about
fundamentally it is a belief, because you would admit that it is ultimately subjective, right? Of why you would choose.
I'm sorry, I don't follow. Like I said, it was a policy for how to choose what to do. I don't see why that makes it a belief.
Yeah, because if it's ultimately subjective, right, then you have no fundamental reason to actually choose it, and so your choice is
I don't agree with that at all, because as I told you in a previous conversation, my love for my wife, my belief that she's the most wonderful woman in the world, that's obviously purely subjective. Not everyone agrees with me, but that doesn't mean it doesn't give me a reason about how to plan my life. It obviously gives me reasons.
Yeah, I'm not saying it doesn't give you a reason, but I'm saying that what you just called it, and you called it your belief that you love your wife, and I would say it's qualified. Yeah, it is qualified, but it's the same thing with what Alvin Plantinga would claim as a properly basic belief, right? It's something that's true to me, and you can't say otherwise. Because it's for me, it's still qualified.
But that's not what he's claiming. He's claiming it's an objective truth, which makes a difference to the rational life plans of everyone. If it would be fine if he was just saying this is just some subjective experience of mine and you don't have to worry about it. But he's claiming it's the ultimate truth about reality. This is the being that created the universe. And if you don't go along with my chosen life path, you'll end up in hell. Yeah. That's what he's saying. So if he wants me to accept that, then you've got to offer reasons beyond just, it's a properly based belief for me.
It does have like ontological responsibility for it, I guess.
So sorry, say again. What were you saying?
Yeah, it does making a claim that God exists, even if you call it a properly basic belief, has a huge requirement. Like it has to be sort of.
If you're claiming God exists in mind, independent reality, and you want me to believe it too, you must offer a reason. If all you're saying is, well, I find it's a properly basic belief, then you haven't offered a consideration that could possibly rationally persuade anyone who didn't have the same experience as you in that matter. I mean, okay, you can say there's a community of people who have that experience, but the thing about it is, the community of people who can experience the colour red, it's sort of like we can take steps to confirm there's something out there in mind, independent reality that they're responding to. So if you can do the same for the community of people who believe in God, okay, then I'll pay attention. But I've never seen anyone do that. So as far as I can tell, it's a community of people who have a particular take on the nature of reality, but I don't know any reason to think it corresponds to something in mind, independent reality. If I knew a reason, then I'd pay attention. Yep.
Okay. Well, I guess I would want to ask you one last question, because it's been we're almost reaching 1 hour, and I guess that I would like you to make a closing statement and say that in terms of you setting standards for beliefs, what advice would you give someone who and how should they determine what they should believe, and why is your moral code, I guess, the best one for you, if that's okay?
I'm not sure if you're talking about beliefs about the physical world or beliefs about morality, but I'll cover both. Okay, so in the case of beliefs about the physical world, you should be aware that your mind very well may be designed to trick you in all sorts of ways. So when you form beliefs about the physical world, you should always make every effort to check that they stand up to every possible way to push back against them. Every possible way to criticise these beliefs, you have to make sure they stand up to every test you can put to them. That's for beliefs about the physical world. With beliefs about morality, my recommendation would be you should look within yourself. You should face up to the reality that, here you are on this planet full of suffering. Human beings are dying of preventable causes. You can probably do something to prevent it. Animals are suffering horribly in factory farms. You don't have to buy that product if you don't want to. Animals are suffering horribly in the wild. All this stuff is happening. Here you are on this planet. Just look within yourself and ask honestly, what is it you truly want to do with your life? And if you find you just want to seek out pleasure for yourself, I guess that's okay. Then in that case, choose the life path that is best calculated towards that goal, which probably involves cooperating with others and respecting their rights. But if you think you would like to do something aimed at stopping all the suffering, then I think you should go for it. And that's how you should choose what your moral code should be.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Rupert, thank you so much for your time, and I hope that we could do this again.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. Bye, bro.
All right.
So that's the end of it. Thanks for tuning in, guys. This is your host, Elmo Ador Jr. And thank you for listening in. And please subscribe. Please follow us on Facebook. Please follow this. Please. Thanks.
Gearheads know that some projects need so many parts, it feels like you need a whole storage unit just to store them. That's what eBay Motors' 122 million parts are for. Think of it as your virtual parts garage. They've always got the right fitment at the right prices. Use the eBay Motors app or visit ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.
Holidays are here, and so is fashionable fitness. Gift yourself a Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3 5G, a phone that folds in half to literally stand on its own. Pair it with the Galaxy Watch 4 for ultimate wellness and wow factor. Check health stats, flex personal records. Over 90 activities can be tracked, like biking, swimming, golfing, and more. Invest in yourself with tech made to crush goals. Holidays open up with Galaxy. Shop it all at Samsung.com. 5G connection and availability may vary. Check with carrier. Products sold separately.